call them facilitators. I think people get scared off the term coach. So like if you never played the game, you can still be a great youth facilitator. You can facilitate a great environment, a great practice environment, training environment, great game environment without knowing how to coach. And so that's what I wanted that video library to be. Like if you're a first-time coach, even if you just did those drills in there that I showed, even if you just did those every day for 30 to 60 to 90 minutes, they are going to get better over the course of the year that you have them, and they will want to come back and play next year.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Clearing the Bases, the podcast where we step up to the plate and dive deep into the world of youth baseball. I'm your host, Jimmy Filangieri. You know, on this show, we discuss all things related to the preparation and development of youth baseball players, coaches, and yes, even parents. So sit back, settle in, and get ready to hear from some of the greatest baseball minds out there.
You can dummy it down, use wiffle balls, use tennis balls, use rag balls, like use lighter, softer implements so if they do get hit, they're not going to be as scared of it. But those are simple communication drills that anybody could do every day. And then yes, when you get into a game, it's going to make it a little bit easier when they get on the field to be able to communicate, call for fly balls. It's just, I think there's simple things that you can do, and every drill out there you can modify for a 5 to 6 year old because I've done it.
Okay, everybody, here we go again. So today we have another, I know I say it all the time, we have special guests, but this is a really special guest for me. We have Ryan Brownlee, the Assistant Executive Director of the ABCA. Ryan brings a wealth of experience and passion to his role as the Assistant Executive Director, where he is dedicated to advancing the mission of supporting and educating baseball coaches at all levels. A former collegiate coach with over 2 decades of experience, Ryan has spent 16 years as an assistant coach and recruiting coordinator at the Division I level. He served at programs like the University of Evansville, where he began his coaching career, and the University of Iowa, where he played a key role in player development and recruitment. Ryan capped his on-field coaching career as the head coach at Western Illinois University, leading the program for 7 seasons and mentoring student athletes both on and off the field. Let's get into a little bit about his ABCA journey. So he's been there since 2019. Ryan has been instrumental in growing the organization's impact, particularly in areas such as professional development, networking, and fostering a culture of mentorship among baseball coaches. He is also a driving force behind the ABCA's commitment to promoting safety, inclusivity, and innovation within the sport. Off the field, Ryan is a sought-after speaker, the host of the well-known ABCA podcast, and an advocate for coaches' education, sharing his insights and experience to inspire the next generation of baseball leaders. His commitment to the game and his coaching community makes him a cornerstone of the ABCA's ongoing success, and I am proud to call him a friend. You know what I'm going to say. Before we get into the conversation with Ryan, let's hear a few words about the 6-Tool app.
For baseball coaches like you, every game brings measurable progress. However, game time isn't the time for trial and error learning. Instead, have a proactive approach. Use 6-Tool, the best baseball player development tool on the market. We provide a platform to level up your coaching strategy by helping you to quickly identify and address your players' knowledge of the game. By using our easy-to-implement interactive player quizzes, you can assess position-specific issues, overall baseball IQ, and much more. Win more games and develop better overall baseball players with effective off-the-field training. Visit us at 6-tool.com. 6-Tool. Get ahead in the game.
Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for having me.
Boy, that was a mouthful, wasn't it?
That's a lot. Just the title itself is a lot.
Well, hey, look.
Funny. My kids don't even know what I do still. Like, they knew what I did when I coached, but they're like, what do you do? I'm like, well, we just do a lot of different things.
Yeah, but I mean, look, with an introduction like that, to me, that's a testament to everything that you have done to this game. And, I know me, for one, I can tell you that I appreciate everything that you do, and it's made a world of difference.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It means a lot. I think when you're passionate about anything, I think it carries over, and I think that's what we are. And I think that's why our organization is so good, not just from the people in the office that are really talented at what they do, but also our members. I get reminders every year at the convention of how good our members are. And so I always tell people that that's a huge part of our convention is the people that show up and attend and participate. And so I think that's why our convention's the best. Just because of our participation that we have with our members.
Yeah, I mean, you'll get no argument from me there. I mean, obviously, I'm involved with the ABCA, and I attend the conventions every year. And what you have done, the ABCA collectively, what you have done for coaches at every single level never ceases to amaze me. I mean, it's a fantastic thing.
Yeah, and we're always trying to improve too. Even if you look at this year's convention, we added a baseball ops hot stove, which we had never done before because we felt like that was a crowd that we had not served as well. There's a ton of ops people that show up at our convention now, whether they're buying equipment for their programs or just getting new tips. And then I thought the youth and travel hot stove this year was great that Jordan Baltimore put together some really good panels, and we got some really good survey responses back from that part of it. So we are always trying to evolve and grow and help our membership in any way possible.
I sat in on those presentations that Jordan put together, and I mean, I was just sitting there taking notes upon notes upon notes because there was just so much good information that they were putting out there. And I think that this is going to be something that is like everything that you've been doing. This is going to be something that's going to grow year after year after year. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I think we do a good job of slow burn. My bosses are great, but I have a bunch of crazy ideas that they'll always try to pump the brakes on me, which is good. I think you have to have somebody in the office that's willing to stick their neck out and try new things. I think that's how you evolve and grow. And I know you had the Savannah Bananas on. I think they're a really good example of, I call it freedom to fail. I think you have to try things. I do. I think you have to try. Not all of it's going to work, and it may not all be perfect, but I think in the beginning you have to start slow with things like that. And then as you get and build over time, it's things like that that grow. You look at all of our hot stoves, they've all kind of evolved in their own way over time, and they're all a little bit different. And the pitching is the first one that we ever ran, and that was really small. For those of us that went to the first pitching hot stove, I think in Orlando a long time ago, it was a room with chairs of coaches just hashing it out, and then it grew, and then hitting was added after that, and then we've added all the position-specific ones. It's just like anything else. It grows over time, and I think you have to evolve and grow and continue to learn and grow.
You hit the nail right on the head because when I interviewed Adam, he said the same thing that you just said. It's almost like a trial and error thing. Some things work, some things don't. And, again, that's how you grow. It's just like anything else, even a baseball player, right? You learn from your mistakes. So it's no wonder.
Ty Gillum was on our podcast, so we dove in a lot about, I think it's fans first, I think, is their motto.
Yes.
Which I think if you look at the Bananas, that's exactly what a great motto is. Like, it's fans first. And so they're always trying to evolve for their fans. And, whether it's somebody new for them that's never seen or interacted with them, but then also they have a diehard group. It's almost like the Grateful Dead now for the Bananas. It is like They have people that go to every game. And so I think they've built a really cool following there. And I think our organization's a little bit that way too. Like, that we have an avid and rabid fan base basically for our organization, and that's why our organization's so great, because people are really passionate about what we do.
Oh, absolutely. So let's move in a little bit of different direction. Let's talk about what you did leading up to getting to the ABCA, and then how you got so involved and became an assistant director as you did.
Yeah, if you would have asked me when I was playing what I was going to do when I got done playing, it was not coaching. It was not going to be baseball coaching. That's what my dad and brother did. And so I had 2 classes left to finish at Evansville when I got done playing. I finished in the spring of '97, played 1 summer of independent baseball, and that was good enough for me. I had a really good summer with the Evansville Otters. I think I hit .315, scored a bunch of runs. I was a table setter, so I was going to steal a bunch of bases and try to hit home plate as many times as I could that way, but I kind of knew that's as good as I was going to do. I got an invite to go to spring training with the Pirates the next year, but it just wasn't. Back then, minor league baseball was so different. You know, if you were invited to a tryout in Florida for the Pirates, there's going to be 500 people there. So it wasn't like they're just trying to cover their backside on that.
Sure.
So I kind of knew. I think I had always understood where my level was going to be in Division I baseball. I probably exceeded my talent level, and that's why I spend a lot of time on imagery and visualization now with coaches and players, because I think it is something that allowed me to compete at a high level with a marginal skill set. But my dad asked me if I wanted to help Evansville out that fall because I had 2 classes left to finish, and literally within like a week of practice I was like, oh, I think I want to coach now. So like it didn't take long. I think for those of us that get the coaching bug, they know immediately, like, okay, this is what I should be doing. But back then, it was a non-paid position, so I worked for free for 2 years. I was basically a bartender I was just as much a bartender and summer league coach as I was coaching at the University of Evansville, because that's how I paid my bills. Now, you can make it work. I was paying $56 a month in rent at the place that I lived at. It was not nice. We never turned the heat on. Rip Collins is a really good friend of mine, family friend. We moved to Evansville in '79, so I still have longtime friends from 1979 on. But I lived with Rip Collins, and he worked at the Budweiser distributor. He's at Memorial High School now. He's the head baseball coach at Memorial. My high school had great tradition. I played for the same coach that coached Don Mattingly. I think I only lost 4 games in 4 years in high school with my class. Like, it was we won a state championship my senior year at Memorial. But he worked at a Budweiser distributor, and we never turned our heat on. So, like, when he would bring the beer that fell off the truck that they couldn't sell, he would just leave them out because our apartment was so cold. I probably should have died those 2 years because I had a space heater in my bedroom to just make it work. Talk about, like, I'd sleep with 5 layers on. But did that for 2 years, and then those early coaching journeys, there's always crossroads for college baseball coaches. There's a lot of crossroads. So I was like, I don't know if I can afford to keep doing this. I was making a lot of money bartending. I was like, maybe I should just go to Chicago and work for my dad's college roommate who owned a really good bar in Chicago called Alcock's. That's by the Board of Trade. And luckily, a job at James Madison opened up. And Spanky McFarland was the head coach at James Madison. He had actually started the baseball program at Northern Illinois. They had baseball at Northern, and then they dropped it, and then they brought it back. So he came from Georgia Tech to start the program at Northern Illinois. This was a $9,000 position. Back then it was restricted earnings. It was a Title IX position, so it's full-time hours, part-time pay. But at that point, you just want the job. Whatever the job that you can get at that point, 2 years in, you need to take it. Terry Rooney, who is the recruiting coordinator at South Carolina, had left James Madison to go to Old Dominion. So that's how I ended up interviewing, because I torched Northern Illinois. I got the job at JMU because I torched Northern Illinois my junior year. We played them in a 4-game series at Bosse Field, and I think I was 14 of 17 the first weekend. So it was a good starting point to my junior year, which ended up having 90 hits and 68 runs scored. My junior year was an academic All-American. So that's kind of how I got in with Spanky, and was there for 4 years. We had great teams at JMU. If you look at the history of the Colonial, it's not really the Colonial anymore, but back then it was East Carolina, Richmond, William and Mary, Old Dominion. For that part of the world, the Colonial, and nationally, the Colonial was number 1 or 2 in the RPI every year, because the ACC wasn't as good as it is now back then. So Virginia wasn't what it was. Maryland and ACC wasn't what it was. So our league would kind of beat up on people in non-conference games, Tuesday, Wednesdays. My 3rd year, we broke the score record for wins, played in the regionals. I think our last 4 non-conference games, we scored over 25 runs.
Wow.
So, and that team could really hit and pitch. There were probably between the freshman and senior class that third year, there were probably 15 drafts on that team. So we had done a good job recruiting, but also developing. And then same thing, you kind of hit another crossroads because it's like, can I continue to work here for $9,000? I was doing laundry for the athletic department. I paid for my own master's. I was coaching summer ball, so I did 5 summers of summer baseball, 1 in New York, 2 in Cape Cod, where I played in the Cape and then coached up there for 2 years, and then was in Quincy, Illinois, in the what's called the Prospect League now. That was 2 years. And then that last year at JMU, I got married. My son was born, and it's one of those, like, can I ask my family to scrape along here for 20 to 25 grand a year? And then luckily the job at Iowa opened up. And so flew out to Iowa. Big Ten interviews are different. It's a 2-day process, so you interview with faculty, staff. But I was prepared. Luckily, I had got my master's at JMU. They have a really good athletic administration program at JMU. And so one of my advanced coaching classes, I spent that whole semester putting a recruiting manual together because I knew if I was going to stay in, that was going to be my next step, was going from an assistant coach to recruiting coordinator. Because I felt like that's where my talent probably plays more than anything and played more than anything at the college level, was communicating with players. So I got pretty good at getting some yeses from kids. You get told no a lot. You get a thick skin. If you want to be a recruiting coordinator at the college level, you better have thick skin because you're going to get told no a lot. But you also have to pick the phone up and contact people. But I got good at that part. But that recruiting manual that I put together at JMU, that's why I got my job at Iowa. And that was a great time for me. Finally got benefits, had health insurance for the first time at 28. And so had a really good job at Iowa. We got things going there, and then had spent, 16 years as an assistant. And it was, you get to that point where you're 16 years in. If you want to, it works for some guys to stay as an assistant. And I would have been more than happy to stay as an assistant coach. I really liked being an assistant. I liked dealing with players. I really liked the development side with being an assistant, being hands-on with players. And then got my job at Western Illinois and slept in my office for a year at Western Illinois my first year. You think about Division I job, but we couldn't afford 2 houses. So my family stayed in Iowa City my first year. My dad actually came out of retirement and coached at Iowa for a year. So he got to live in my house. My dad was living in my house with my family. Shout out to my wife, Amy, and my children. They're saints with what they've had to deal with in baseball. They are saints. And then had a great time at Western. It was really challenging. We had no resources. You would laugh if you saw what our budget was at Western Illinois. I was raising money for an assistant coach, and it was very gratifying because we were doing things the program had never done before, but you knew how hard it was and how difficult. But that was kind of the fun part of it too, is how difficult it was. And then the job at the ABCA opened, and I had been a member for a long time, so I knew the organization was so good. I had spoke in 2012 at the convention in Anaheim, and so I'd been involved on that, had done some committee stuff. I voted for the USA Today poll, which is run through us with our member coaches. So I knew it was going to be a good job, but you never know, and I would have been happy to stay in coaching too. Yeah. It just didn't work out for me to stay at Western. They weren't going to be willing to make some changes, but part of it is I knew the ABCA job was going to be good. But I've always just kind of taken jobs as they've come. I've never worried about jobs, and so I really didn't know what I was going to do for the ABCA. I just knew I wanted the job, and then kind of figured it out as we go. And my position here has really evolved over 7 years. I've picked up new things every year. It's always been the podcast and the Barnstormers, but then I've picked up different committees. So if you look at, technically my committees now are youth, high school travel, diversity, and then all the small college ones now. So Division II, Division III, NAIA, JUCO, and the Pacific, which is the California and NWAC schools. So, and I'm happy to be back on the college side too. Yeah. I like dealing with college coaches. I was always dealing with college coaches anyway with my position, but now you get a little more hands-on and help them develop legislation. So there's a lot of cool pieces that have come out of that. But it makes my Thursday at the convention crazy.
I mean,
It was crazy anyway, but now I think I gave 8 different talks on Thursday night.
I was going to say, because every time I see you at the convention, all I see is like smoke coming from behind you because you're running from one spot to another. And it's like, well, there goes Ryan.
I'm old school from an itinerary standpoint still. I hand type an itinerary. I have to have that. So it's basically from the start of my day, which is at 4:30 in the morning when I get up, work out, meditate, and then it's breakfast, and then it's on to the meetings, and then usually hot stoves finish around midnight. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday are 12, 14-hour days for me, which is good. Like, I think it's gratifying. We put a lot of work in to pull something like that off, but it is gratifying when we're done on Sunday.
Oh, I bet it is to see, that amount of coaches in one spot, and, the feedback that you get from anybody that goes there and says what a wonderful experience it is. Well, that's a tribute to the way you guys put the show on. Yeah. And because it's fantastic.
And we are always tweaking things. That's why the survey is important. When we send the post-convention survey out to our members, our exhibitors, our sponsors, we want feedback from people because it helps us for future years, whether it's okay, the food needs to get better or this needs to get better. Now, there's a lot of things out of our control. Like, we can't do anything about the weather. That's always a response. It's like, can you get to warmer weather? Well, there's some things. We sign contracts out 10 years ahead to keep the hotel costs down, and I don't think people realize that. It's like, okay, we would go to California, but realistically, do you want to pay $500 a night in hotels?
Yeah.
Like, we can't ask our members to do that.
Right.
And it's funny because everybody wants to get into the Gaylord, which it's a great place, but I'll get texts like, hey, the non-room rate is like $600 a night. I'm like, yeah, like that's the amount of work that our office puts in to try to keep the hotel costs down.
Yeah, and I mean, you do a great job there because the cost of a room at the Gaylord, like this year, for instance, was relatively inexpensive. Yeah. It was fantastic. So that's
great.
Also
why that weekend, people are always like, well, the weekend, that's also why we go on that weekend, because places like the Gaylord and conventions, they are looking for people to come in that weekend. They're always willing to work with us on the price because there is usually nothing going on from a convention standpoint the weekend after New Year's because everybody's crushed from Christmas and New Year's. So that's always been a perfect weekend for us to run at the weekend after New Year's because the convention centers are willing to work with us on pricing.
Right. All right. So we know, because I talk about it on this show all the time, about educating coaches. So give us a little rundown how the ABC addresses educating coaches.
Yeah, I mean, it's just if you go on our website or the app, if you don't have the My ABCA app, that's another great resource that we've added over the last 7 years. I mean, it's everything. Our video library is getting close to 1,000 videos now. Wow. So that's always, I think, what draws people to us in the beginning is the amount of video content that we have. But then our Barnstormers event in the fall are great. And this is all for your $75. I think we are one of the cheapest associations in the world. That has a lot to do with our exhibits and our sponsors at the convention and throughout the year. They allow us to keep our costs down. So if you look at $75 and then $90 for the convention, between membership and convention, we are the lowest of anybody. It's crazy to think that you're only going to pay $165 to interact the entire year, but also get to go to the convention with that. And then we do have some member benefits that are great too. But there's a lot of hard copy stuff on the app that I've uploaded along the years, and then I'm adding stuff onto our YouTube channel. Just put a whole youth practice plan on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. It's got 19 different videos in there. And I'm a visual learner. I think most coaches are visual learners. I think most athletes are visual learners. And I wanted to just take that initial youth practice plan that we had on the app and turn that to video form because I think people learn by watching. And I know I learn that way. So I can't read instructions. I'm terrible at it. If you give me printed instructions, I'm going to have a hard time wrapping my head around that. And that's how I learned podcasting. I learned podcasting by going on YouTube and watching people do it. Record, also the editing equipment. That's how I've learned pretty much all the editing stuff that I know how to do now, whether it's the audio for the podcast, the video portion for YouTube, or any of the editing that I did for the youth practice planning, I learned off watching YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. That's exactly, I learn by seeing. And I got to tell you, what you were just talking about, and this is something we should get into a little bit about those practice plans that you put on YouTube, because I went and I looked at them and they're fantastic. And I believe that every youth coach should watch those videos.
And not just for youth coaches too. I think
That's
any
true, too.
coach,
Yeah.
but I wanted it to be youth specific. That's where our biggest need has been lately with our membership, is because our youth and travel coaches have grown. I think the way that I explain it is, you're really not going to add probably any more college teams. You're not going to add any more high school teams, but you're always going to add youth and travel coaches. You are. And so we really felt like we needed to fill that need, because we probably get more questions on that side of it now than anything. And we did we did kind of a focus group at the convention that Bonnie Hoffman and Jeff Sofa ran. It was like first year, second year, third year coaches that were just getting into it. And I said, well, one, a lot of them didn't even know there was some of that stuff on the app, the youth practice plan. There's a dynamic warm-up in there. Like, I think things that I call them facilitators. I think people get scared off the term coach. So like, if you never played the game, you can still be a great youth facilitator. You can facilitate a great environment, a great practice environment, training environment, great game environment without knowing how to coach. And so that's what I wanted that video library to be. Like, if you're a first-time coach, even if you just did those drills in there that I showed, even if you just did those every day for 30 to 60 to 90 minutes, they're going to get better over the course of the year that you have them, and they will want to come back and play next year. Yeah. And I left the mistakes in there. I said it in the intro. I think we're in a great time to coach, but we're in a tough time to coach, because all you're going to see is somebody's edited version of their best bolt. You're going to see a really clean catch play. You're going to see a lot of contact. That's not what training looks like. There's a lot of missed balls. There's a lot of swinging and missing. And so I wanted it to be an honest look at what working with youth players looks like.
Yeah. I mean, look, I agree with you 100%, because let's face it. Yes, when we're practicing, of course it's not. That's why we practice. Okay. Because it's not perfect. We need to learn. And how do we learn? We learn by making mistakes. But I love what you said about being a facilitator and taking these, because they are rudiments of the game that you have on video, and take these rudiments and teach your players that. I think a lot of times what happens is coaches get so caught up in the trying to work on the complicated parts of the game that they leave the basics behind. And I think that if more people would look at those videos and understand what you just said, that yes, you could make a practice out of this, and this is your practice, and I guarantee you your players will get better. I was just talking to people.
Even that simple 2-man communication, 3-man communication drill, I think that's a great place to go. Kids are afraid of the baseball. Like, they're afraid of getting hit with the ball. So you can dummy it down. Use wiffle balls, use tennis balls, use rag balls. Like, use lighter, softer implements, so if they do get hit, they're not going to be as scared of it. But those are simple communication drills that anybody could do every day. And then, yes, when you get into a game, it's going to make it a little bit easier when they get on the field to be able to communicate, call for fly balls. It's just, I think there's simple things that you can do. And every drill out there you can modify for a 5 to 6-year-old, because I've done it. Yeah. Like the hitting portion, their med ball tossing, I've used 4-pound, 2-pound implements with 5 and 6-year-olds. I think med ball tosses are a great place to teach hitting, throwing, fielding. I really like fielding drills with med balls too, because it gets them in their legs. Yep. It gets them to feel a heavier implement, that they're going to bring their hands to the middle of their body that they don't always do with a glove or a baseball.
Yep.
I think it cleans a lot of things up. I think the drills that are in there, you don't have to really coach a lot. Just show them the drill. Again, it's not always going to look pretty. They may not always understand some of the stuff, like the tap drill on the pitching part of it. I don't think there's one kid that did the tap drill on there. I showed it, but that shows you what it's going to look like too. I showed that drill, but I would have had to go back and readdress that with them at some point. Like, no, and probably have to get some hands on them a little bit to actually show that, no, You're not throwing on the first one. You're just working on your knee and hands separating. You're going to do that twice, and then on the third one, you're going to throw.
Yeah. But I think,
and for little kids too, have them throw into a wall.
Yeah.
I think that gets a little dicey with the little guys too. When I'm working with 5 and 6 year olds at camp, we're usually throwing into a screen, or that way they're not worried about hurting their teammates.
Yeah. Yeah, but I like the way you said, that they're not going to get it on their first time, because, again, this is another thing that I think is really important to hammer home, is that when you're teaching or running through drills, your job as a coach is actually to walk around and make sure they're doing it right, because whatever you're teaching them, whatever you just demonstrated for them, they may feel like they're doing what you said, and maybe they're not. So, you can't just give them something. And I'll use this as an example. I saw on social. Film it, by the way. Film it is great.
Film it. We have the best piece of technology ever for video now, and it's so easy. I wish I'd had this funny story when I first started coaching. We used mini VHS tapes. Like, that's how we filmed our. That's how I filmed myself. Is you would have to film with those mini cassette tapes, and then put it into a VHS converter. And so at JMU, we didn't have the budget for it at Evansville, but at JMU, each one of our hitters had their own individual VHS tape that I would have to record, put it in, and then luckily the computers got advanced, and so RightView Pro ended up being kind of that next thing from a player development standpoint, where I loved RightView Pro. You could do a lot of individual breakdown stuff, but also you could compare with big league hitters too. Like, I really liked that portion of it, with being able to compare hitters and pitchers with movement.
Sure.
You see it all the time now of, try to find somebody. I always tried to find somebody that was their similar size and also how they moved. So I think I was probably talking movement-based stuff way before anybody else was, from a player development standpoint, of trying to match up what they were and how they moved. Yeah. For me, that makes more sense than trying to put everybody in the same box. Yeah. Because they all do move different.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think if you watch that YouTube series, they're all different shapes and sizes at that age, developmentally. Some are stronger than others, some are weaker than others. So you're going to see all shapes and sizes in that too. So.
Yeah, I think once I learned, and this is, going back quite a few years ago, once I learned that, yes, every player moves different. Okay, you can't create cookie cutters. Because I remember, like, when I first started giving lessons, I would primarily give hitting lessons. And at that time, and again, this is going back maybe 15 years ago, I always wanted to try and create the same hitter in each person. Well, no, you can't do that. Okay, now I know that now. Because, again, like you said, everybody moves different. Everybody, has to have their own way of doing what you're trying to get them to do, I guess, if I could explain it in that way.
Yeah, I think simple things with hitting early on. I always start with breathing techniques with little players, with the teeny ones, because I think that's the best place to start for them, to get them comfortable, get them centered in on each, and that's nothing mechanics. And then I showed a couple, I think, really good setup drills in that hitting portion with the connection balls, where you're having them squeeze something in between their legs to get their feet underneath them, get them in a good, strong lower half, athletic lower half. And then I think you can do some really cool things with the connection ball with their elbows to get their elbows down and relaxed.
Yeah.
I think there's just some really cool stuff that you can do. Just if you can get them in a good setup, hitting wise, fielding wise, pitching wise, the end part is probably going to take care of itself if you can just get them in a good athletic setup.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's, again, something that a lot of coaches, they need to understand that there are, number one, there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's several ways to do it, and the information is out there. Use it. Try it. You'll find out what works for you, and then make up your own plans from there. It's, nowadays, like I said, I've said this a million times, it's so much easier now than like when I first began coaching, because none of this was out here. So use it. It's there, use it.
And then besides setup, I think inbox routines are so important for young hitters. Like, teach them to tap the outside part of the plate, teach them to tap the inside part of the plate with their lead hand, and then have them waggle their bat at the pitcher and then tap the back of their shoulder. I do this a lot with the little guys. It's because if they just get in there, they have no idea where their hands are at in relation to their body. Gary Ward was big on this. He was very scientific on it, and we've talked about Gary Ward a lot, my passion for Gary Ward. We used to watch. My high school coach really knew nothing about hitting, but we had a bunch of drills. But we did watch the Gary Ward interlocking sequence of parts video every year before we started. So I had 4 years worth of notes on this, but that was one of the things that I always did that helped me is after I tap home plate and waggle, I would just tap my barrel to my shoulder and lift my hands. And I think that puts the hands in just a very simple, easy position, starting position for every kid. Yeah. Their hands up by their shoulders or a little bit higher just to tap and lift. And that gets them in some sort of a consistent spot every time. But if you don't have Gary called it connection, if you don't have some sort of connection to your barrel to your body, you're having no idea where your hands are at.
Yeah.
So if you can get consistent with that setup, you're at least throwing your hands from the same spot every time.
Yes.
And so you at least have a chance to make some adjustments to the baseball.
Yeah, when I was working with the little guys, very similar. I would tell them, put the bat on your shoulder and just lift up the bat to 45. You're ready to roll. That's it. Now you know where your hands are supposed to be. Very simple. So, okay. I mean, I could keep going on the youth stuff for a while, but there's something that I want to get to. Well, there's a couple of things. The challenge to me, trying to get coaches to understand that they need education is very challenging. Okay, so I know that this is something that you understand, and coaches' education, parent education, even player education. How's the ABCA working to address these issues to try and get coaches that, even if maybe they do attend the convention, maybe it's a weekend for them to get away and that's all they do, but they need to further their education.
And that's where the app, you can dive in a lot of stuff. My player manual that I had at Western Illinois is in the app, the parent letter that I would send out preseason. And this is college. I sent out a letter to the parents before the season started on my expectations of them. And so I think there's some things in there to help you eliminate some of headaches that you may have. And I call it inexpensive experience. There's a lot of inexpensive experience in there that somebody has already done this for you and done the heavy lifting, where it's now here's a blanket parent letter for you if you want it. And that's where you have to seek things out, because I guarantee somebody's already done the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah.
I think the education piece makes your life easier on that part of it. I think it eliminates headaches and keeps you out of trouble too. Yeah. Yeah. We're in a crazy society right now. We are. It's a wild time out there, and so you do need to protect yourself too.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you just said, because now I'm going to go on the ABCA app and I'm going to find that letter, because I mean, I do have one that I use, when I talk to the parents, but I want to see what yours was like compared to, and then steal whatever I can steal from you and use it.
Because if you don't educate your parents or your players on that stuff, they just don't know. And that's your responsibility as a facilitator or coach is you do need to educate the people that you're around every day. And so, yeah, the parents are a big part of this. I think parents could be the best part of your team or your program if you allow them to be, if you use them as a resource. And really, at the end of the day, parents just want to know if you're going to keep their kids safe.
Yeah.
Like, is their kid going to have a good time, and are you going to keep their kids safe? Like that, I think that's all parents really want.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Obviously they want them to get better, and I know there's some crazy parents out there that think their 8-year-old's going to play in the big leagues, but likely they're not.
Right.
But I think you have a responsibility to do that for your parents and allow them to be a valuable resource for your program and for the kids. It's going to be much more enjoyable for you as a coach if you get your parents involved. I think David Klein does a really good job with that. David's on our youth and travel committees. I think he does a really good job with parent engagement. He sends a bunch of surveys out to his parents. He does a pre-season one. He does an in-season one. He does weekly ones. I think the more input you can get from your parents on that stuff, I think it makes for a much more enjoyable experience for you as a coach, but also for the kids too.
Yeah. And, again, let's face it, a lot of, I know me, way back when, again, I never looked at the parents as an ally. The parents are your biggest ally because they're going to help you with the player because they want the best for the player. So if you can educate them to help you, and it was interesting because
let the parents go through practice with you.
Yes. Yeah.
Like if you want more engagement from the kids and you want parents to help you when they're home and they're working on their game at home, you need to teach the parents how to do this stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that way it saves you time. It's going to make your job much easier because now you know when they go home, they're working on what you want them to work on as a coach.
Yeah. I mean, a simple thing, a couple of coaches I was talking to recently, they send out, this is at the high school level, they send out a weekly email to the parents with basically the schedule, what's going to happen this week and da-da-da-da-da. And I was, again, I would have never done something like that. But when we talked about it and they explained it, I said to myself, this is fantastic. Because if we have a team meeting on Wednesday at 7 o'clock and the kid, maybe will forget, maybe won't remember, whatever. You have the parent, hey, Johnny, don't you have a meeting 7 o'clock tomorrow night? And it helps you. So use it. I mean, if you can, instead of beating your head against the wall.
Just more hands.
Absolutely.
More hands helps.
Yeah. And like I said, it was something that I would have never thought of because, again, I was like, I'm not, I was always of the school that I want to communicate with my players. I'm trying to teach them how to be young men. They need to be on board. But you know what? To have somebody there that's going to give a little extra push to get them there. Okay, and if that's the parent, great, use it.
By the way, I would like, and I've never done this, but I get these random ideas. Have an umpire come to your first parents meeting, please. Have umpires show up.
Great.
Have them interact with the umpires, please.
Great.
And just, I think see it a lot now, and it doesn't need to be that way, but I think if you can get more people in the same room together, I would highly encourage you to have some umpires come to your parents' meetings.
I could tell you a funny story about that. This was last year, parent meeting. Okay, one part of my parent meeting is talking about how we interact with umpires. Okay, so I said, okay, and I started it off this way, and I said, look, let's get something straight. Okay, the umpires that umpire our games are not very good. They're high school umpires. They are not major league umpires. They're going to make mistakes. We make mistakes. So, and then I go into the whole thing. Well, anyway, when I finished the whole thing about how we don't talk back to umpires, we don't yell at them, da-da-da-da-da, after the meeting was over, one of the fathers came over to me, tapped me on the shoulder, and he says, hey, coach, he said, I don't particularly care what you said that the umpires are not very good. So I was like, well, they're not. He goes, I'm an umpire.
Being honest.
Right. Well, no, but then he went on to say that I appreciate what you did by telling them, telling the parents, knock it off, basically, leave them alone. So,
because that's a big part of the kid's experience, too. Like your kids, whether you think or not, your kid doesn't want you yelling at the umpire.
Oh, God.
Your kid may not tell you this, but your kid doesn't want you yelling at the umpires.
Yeah. I mean, Ryan, I've been coaching for over 20 years. I've never been thrown out of a game. Never. There's, why are you, don't get me wrong. I've gone out to umpires. We've had discussions, okay? But number one, you're not going to win. So what's
and you end up getting more calls because of it anyway.
Exactly.
Like you get more calls. If the umpires know that you're going to treat them fair and you're all in this together. And I think that's the narrative that everybody's in this whole thing to facilitate an opportunity for the kids to play.
Yes.
So, yes, the umpires are a big part of that. The parents are a big part of that. The coaches are a big part of that. So everybody is in this together to facilitate an experience for the players on the field. And that's all it should be about.
Yeah.
That's all it should. Everybody's in this together as one unit to help provide an experience for the kids on the field.
No doubt whatsoever. And I think if more people took that attitude, now don't get me wrong, I understand as you get to higher levels, it becomes a little bit more important. I get that. But at the youth level, and I include that all the way up to varsity high school baseball, give the guy a break.
Give somebody grace, because you would want that same thing. It's the old golden rule, like treat people how you want to be treated. If you were out there trying to work as an official, as an umpire, you wouldn't want somebody yelling at you.
No, God, no. But so talk to me a little bit about mentors. Okay. What mentors have you had and how have they helped you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. I think we all stand on somebody's shoulders to get to that point. I had some really good Little League coaches growing up. John McCauley's passed away, but luckily he had coached with my dad at Evansville, so he had coached a little bit of college baseball, and so our Little League practices were run like a college practice. We had the same warm-up that Evansville did. We had the same signs. So I had the same signs in Little League that I did in college. So John McCauley was a big one. Played in a really competitive Little League. Same thing. I don't think we lost a whole lot. We had Ryan Barrett was a teammate of mine all the way through Little League, through college. He was our first baseman, best pitcher. Robbie Kent was also a high school teammate of mine. Played at Notre Dame and Arizona State. And then our best player on that team, 11 and 12-year-old team, was Kevin Hardy, who played linebacker for the Jags. And now he was way better at football later on, but I wish he would have stayed with baseball because he was unreal on the baseball field. So we just didn't lose a lot because we had really talented kids. But then got to high school. My high school was really competitive. There were only 2 freshmen ever to play varsity in the history of Memorial High School's program at that point. One was Don Mattingly, and then Robbie Kent was the other one. And then maybe Aaron Grease. Might have been 3, but you knew you were going to play freshman as a freshman. You knew you were going to play JV. I think we had a sophomore team. That's how many kids we had come out for baseball. We had a freshman, sophomore, JV, and varsity team. And so junior year is when you would get your opportunity to play varsity. And so I played a lot early my junior year and then kind of rode the roller coaster of performance, at the bench for a while, played at the end of the year. We ended up beating Scott Rowland in the semi-state to go to the state championship my junior year and got beat and probably should have won. We had a lot of talent on that team. We had a lot more talent on that team than the team that won it my senior year. But Coach Merkel was a really and when you say mentor, I think there's a lot of different ways to mentor people. Coach Merkel's was a tough love mentorship. He was going to be extremely honest with you. He was going to be very hard on you. But at that point in my life, I needed somebody like that because I needed someone to tell me I need to get better. My senior year, I took 5 official visits. I didn't know how good I was at that point. I knew I wanted to play college baseball somewhere. I didn't know if it was going to be Division III. I wanted a high academic school. I wanted a smaller school. So some of the Division III schools actually fit what I was looking for a little bit more. But Coach Merkel, my senior year, he pulled me into the dugout in the middle of the year, and I think we're probably 18-0 at this point. And he goes, Ryan, some days you're a Division I baseball player. He goes, but some days you can't play for our team.
Wow.
And he pulled me in a game. I think we were 11-0. We would go. Coach Merkel liked to compete, so we always played a challenging schedule. So even though we're from Indiana, we would go to Illinois, to Edwardsville, and play Edwardsville High School. For people that aren't from that part of the world, Edwardsville High School is the best program in Illinois. And I think my junior year when we went over there, they were in the middle of like a 44-game winning streak.
Wow.
And we ended up taking a lead on them late, and then it rained, so we would have ended the streak if we would have continued that game, but went back my senior year and we're down 11-0. Coach Merkel liked to take. We had like pages of takes. So like first time through the order you take. If somebody in front of you walked, you took a strike. If somebody in front of you got hit, you took a strike. So we were automatic take, and I'm the first batter up that inning. We're down 11-0. And I swing first pitch. I brain farted. And he calls time and yanks me. Go to the bench. And luckily you could re-enter because I re-entered, and then I ended up knocking the winning run in to end that game. But just from accountability standpoint and keeping you accountable at that point as a high school kid, I needed somebody that was going to keep me accountable, because if you left me to my own devices, it was probably not going to be good for me.
Right.
And then luckily that got me ready to play for my dad and brother in college, because it was the same type of tough love in college with my dad and brother. And people ask how it was playing for your dad. It was not hard playing for my dad. It was really hard playing for my brother, because my brother and I fought a lot. But that's also why I was a good player too, because my brother sat on me for 4 years.
Right.
He did, because I was one of those guys that I didn't need you to tell me how good I'm doing. I needed you to tell me I need to get better. Like, I needed to be challenged. I know not everybody is that way, and I think I'm still a little bit of that way. My family, that's how I was raised. I call it healthy confrontation. I don't think we have enough of that now as a society. I think
agree.
we need to have healthy confrontation. It's okay to get into arguments with people.
Sure.
But then once it's over with, it's over with. And I think that's where we're at in society now, is I think things build up over time, and then it gets to a tipping point where you can't get it back. And then people become mortal enemies for no apparent reason over things that are just arguments. And so luckily Coach Merkel got me ready to play for my dad and brother. But then I was also around some other coaches along the way. Spanky was the complete opposite of my dad. Very laid back, very dry sense of humor. And then Jeff Trundy, I actually played for Coach Trundy in the Cape in 96. And then I coached with Coach Trundy at Falmouth in 99 and 2000, who just passed away from cancer a couple weeks ago. He was another just gentle soul, really cared about the kids, but almost to like zero pulse. But I think you have to be around different types of personalities along the way to show you that just honestly just be yourself. And then my boss at Iowa, Coach Dom, was another really good mentor to me. He took care of me a lot. I wouldn't be in baseball. You know, if Spanky doesn't hire me, I'm not in baseball anymore. If Jack doesn't hire me at Iowa, I'm not in baseball anymore. I'm out in the real world. And so I owe them all a debt of gratitude for taking care of me along the way, because it doesn't always happen that way for the coaching journey for guys.
You had a lot of guys that were there to, you know, build you up.
And honest with you, like it doesn't always feel good.
Oh, no.
Like, I think mentors, if you have a really good mentor, they're going to be honest and tell you the truth, whether it's going to hurt your feelings or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's a form of love, is if that person is really investing in you and pouring into you, they're going to be honest with you when you make mistakes and not tell you that's okay. Like, hey, that needed to get better, or this needs to improve, or this is my expectations of you in our relationship, and this is what I expect of you.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to take all that stuff to heart if it's someone you would take advice from. You know,
right.
if it's not, then don't worry about it.
Exactly.
Like, and I think that's where having that thick skin comes into play too. Like, if there's a person you're talking to that you really wouldn't take a lot of advice from, then it doesn't really matter what's coming out of their mouth. It doesn't.
That's such a great point.
Let it roll off your back.
But, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I mean, my whole motto as far as coaching goes is be brutally honest. And, you know, I could tell you stories, especially with when I was coaching travel baseball, you know, parents getting upset because a player wasn't playing, okay? And I'll sit the player and the parent right in front of me. I'll say, okay, you want to know why he's not playing? Are you guys ready to hear this? Okay, because I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm going to tell you why.
Come watch practice.
I'm going to tell you why, you know, and I'll go through the whole thing. And I would say I cannot remember. That doesn't mean that it didn't happen, but I could not remember a time when something like that didn't turn into a positive. I really can't think of one. It always wound up where the player understood why he wasn't playing, and the parent. And I would tell him, this is what you need to do to get on that field. And now, again, like we talked about earlier, with having the parent as an ally, now the parent is, hey, coach said you need to do this. Are you doing it?
My freshman year of high school, I played soccer, basketball, and baseball in high school, and I was a terrible basketball player. I was awful. Soccer, and I wanted to be a Division I soccer player, honestly. I loved soccer. Soccer was my first love. If I was doing something outside, it was probably pickup soccer. Because the high school I went to, too, like, it was a lot of state championships in soccer. Soccer and baseball were the two best sports at my high school. So, but I just did basketball as kind of a throwaway because my dad really loved basketball. So I played basketball because my dad loved basketball. But I did not like basketball. I didn't like practice. I didn't like, sorry to the coaches at Memorial. I was a bad practice player. It was terrible. But I'm complaining at dinner about not getting to play more. And so that next week, we're going through practice. My dad walks in the gym. And he goes, hey, I'll take you home after practice. And so we get done with practice. I'm in the car with my dad. And he did not mince words, and his language was rough. It's still rough, but he's driving home. He looks at me. He goes, hey, do you know why you're not playing more? And I'm like, no. He goes, well, you don't win every wind sprint. And he goes, until that starts to happen, he goes, you need to shut up. And you know what? I started to win every wind sprint. You know what? I got to play more. So he was right. Yeah. But he was always good with being honest with me on that part of it too. And as a player too, my freshman fall at Evansville, back then you could play 20 games. We played 20 games in the fall. And we'd play USI, Division II school. They're Division I now, but they had a really good program. But we all played Legion against each other. So we had like good infighting between those two programs. And we never played in the spring. So this was the one opportunity that you would play each other's in the fall. So we play 7 games. So we go out there. The academic piece in college, I fit right into. I was really good academically, so that was fine. Socially, I was fine, but the speed of the game is different when you get to Division I. It just is. And so you're playing against all these teams. Guys are older, and I looked like I had forgotten how to play a little bit, which happens to almost every freshman at some point.
Sure.
Either freshmen or sophomores in college, they're going to struggle one of those 2 years. But we go out to USI to play. I made a bunch of errors, struck out, and so we would take the equipment in this blue cargo van. I don't even know how that van still ran, but there was no seats in the back, so I'm sitting on a ball bucket. And my dad's driving, and he looks back. He goes, "Do you have that number for Denison College?" And Denison was one of my 5 official visits. My 5 official visits were Denison, Evansville, University of Portland, Vanderbilt, and then Bradley University. So all small private schools that were good schools. He goes, "Do you have that number for Denison College?" I'm like, "No." Why? He goes, "You're going to need it at the break if you don't start playing better." And luckily, like, I didn't bury me. I took it to heart. I started to work my butt off. That winter, I got after it in the weight room. I was always an avid workout. I'm still an avid workout person, but I think that's where I started to – I think you see it all the time at the college levels. Guys go home for fall break, and some of them come back better, and some of them come back worse. And I ended up leading our team in hitting that spring.
There you go.
But I didn't play our first 7 games, which wow. I didn't deserve it. Kyle Ritter was my roommate that year. He's a surgeon now, but we would do player evaluations. And of our 16 position players, he had me ranked 16th, which was probably right. I probably was the worst position player that fall. Again, he was being honest. But when I came back from winter break, I was a different person.
Yeah, but you understood it. See, a lot of players don't understand that. And that's, again, where you have to be brutally honest. I mean, I know my high school players. I tried. You know, it's the old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I lead them. Well, some of them drink, some of them don't. And, you know, like you said, the guys that drink are the guys that are going to be better. It's common sense.
And I was just lucky that our team started out terrible. We were 0-7 to start the year at Evansville, which obviously didn't sit well with my dad, but it kind of goes back to winning wind sprints. We're on spring break. I still have PTSD from the Altamont Springs Embassy Suites because we would run every morning. Even though we're playing in 90-degree heat, my dad would get us up at 6 to run because we weren't winning. But I started crushing everybody. Me and Jamie Carroll's an 11-year big leaguer, but he could fly. Like, we did all this crazy running training in the fall, and we had guys that could fly. We stole a lot of bases, but it would be me and Carroll. I'm kicking seniors' butts. I'm kicking everybody's butt. And then finally, my dad looked at my brother. He's like, "I'm playing your brother." And my brother was dead set against me playing. They wanted to redshirt me freshman year. My dad was finally like, they were in a coaches meeting. I'm not in this meeting. My dad and brother are like arguing. And my dad's like, "No, Ryan's going in." And luckily I hit, and they could not get me back out. And I think that was kind of a sense of urgency thing on me, is I knew I had to play well every game because I knew I was going back on the bench if I didn't play well.
Yeah.
But then at some point it was like they couldn't talk to me anymore because I think halfway through my sophomore year, I had more hits than my brother had in 4 years at Evansville. So, like, the arguments kind of went away at that point because he would tell me stuff. I'm like, "Hey, I have better numbers than you in 2 years than you did in 4. So the arguments kind of started to go away at that point.
Oh, that's funny. Well, look, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw you a big looping curveball right here, okay? Do you have a fail-forward moment?
Yep. And this has been with me for a long time. It's part of the reason I sign off the podcast with "Leave It Better for Those Behind You." So my second year at JMU, I get a phone interview with Kansas State for a recruiting coordinator's position. And I really hadn't recruited much at this point because I was coaching summer ball. I was doing a little bit of fall recruiting, but I hadn't really spent a lot of time on the road in the summer because it just couldn't afford to do it at that point. So I get a phone interview with Kansas State, and literally the first question that comes out of their mouth is, take us through the 12-month recruiting calendar. And I had not prepped for that question. I was not prepared for that question. And so I fumble it. I know it's bad. They know it's bad. They don't want to tell me it's bad. But I know when I hang up with them, I get through it. But when I hang up that phone, I'm like, I'm not getting that job. And I didn't deserve the job at that point. I think early in your coaching career, you think you're ready for all these positions, and you're not. And luckily, they did not give me the job, because if they would have given me that job at that point and I go work at Kansas State, I'm probably fired in a year because I'm not ready. But we had that advanced coaching class. Mickey Matthews was our football coach, who just went into JMU's Hall of Fame. They won the national championship, I think, in 03 or 04. But he was our first speaker. So Charles McMullen was my master's advisor. He'd started the football program at JMU. He was a great mentor to me, another great mentor. But that advanced coaching class was awesome because a head coach on campus would come and talk for like 20 minutes, and then we would have class. And so Mickey's our first one. He had just gotten fired at Baylor for signing an ACT prep course check for a family. And he basically laid on the grenade for his boss at Baylor. He laid on the sword for his boss.
Right.
So he comes in and he goes, by show of hands, who here wants to work in college athletics? And so that class had like kinesiology majors, had people that wanted to be ADs, people that wanted to be coaches. So a lot of us raised our hands. He goes, I'm just going to tell you one thing. If you get a job in college athletics, you're getting a job because someone just got fired or someone left for a better job. And he said, your responsibility is to make it better for those behind you, to leave it better for those behind you. And so that always stuck with me. But because I was so bad in that interview with Kansas State, that's what I spent that whole semester on, was that recruiting manual. That got me my job at Iowa. And I was ready at that point. When I went and interviewed at Iowa, I was ready to be a recruiting coordinator at that point. But it takes a long time to get there. I know some guys get into it early and they're good. I just think to be a good recruiter, you have to have experience.
Yeah.
And I know it's different now. They don't get on the road as much. From when I started recruiting a lot to the day I was done as a head coach at Western Illinois, I went and watched a lot of games.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I was an old school scout. Even though I was coaching college, I was an old school scout because I hung out with a lot of scouts and coaches along the way. JMU was great for me in that way. All the scouts would work camps with us. We got to be really good friends with the area scouts on the East Coast because they all worked camps with us to make extra money. And so you hung out with all these old-time scouts that kind of took you under their wing. The old guard of coaches in the Colonial back then, Coach Guz at Old Dominion just passed away. Jim Farr was a big league pitcher, coached at William & Mary, but even the assistants were really good on the East Coast at that time, so everybody kind of looked out for each other, but you got a lot of really good tips.
Yeah.
I always went down the line. I would spend a little bit of time behind home plate, but majority of my time was spent down the line watching games. One, to eliminate the distractions of people talking. I just never liked being behind home plate because it bothered me when coaches were talking about jobs more than they were watching games.
Yeah.
Which happens a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's a sewing circle. It is. It's a sewing circle in the baseball college coaching community. But you learn a lot about guys in that type of environment. You learn a lot about guys in camp environment. I always worked camps, whether it was our camp or other organizations' camps. You figure out who can coach. If you go work somebody's camp and it's an 8 to 4 p.m. day, you're going to figure out who likes to coach and who's just there to cash a paycheck.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And that always bothered me too. I never said anything, but I'm a high energy camp person, and I think that's why I still get asked to do camps, because I'm a high energy camp person. It bothered me when guys would just sit on their hands. Because I wouldn't want to coach with that person.
Yeah, I don't get that. I mean,
I wouldn't want to coach with that person.
If you're there, let's go to work.
Yes.
That's the way I look at it.
And again, you're there providing experience for the kids.
Exactly. I mean,
that's another service component besides games and training. If you are working a camp, you're there to provide a memorable experience for those camp attendees.
Absolutely. Well, I know that it's Sunday, and I don't want to keep you much longer, but I do.
That's all right.
I do have one other
Keep
quick
going.
question that I want to
Hopefully
ask.
that answered the fail forward question.
Oh, you kidding? You're like the king of the fail
I
forward.
love
question.
asking that question. It's funny because you can tell who listens. The people that listen to the podcast that come on, they are ready for that question. But then I'll get some that don't listen, and so when that question comes on the back end, it throws people for a loop. But I love asking that question.
Yeah.
And we've gotten some great responses from that question. I think great responses.
I got to tell you that, from me being on your show, had I not been an avid listener of that show, I think that would have caught me off guard. So I was ready. So the last thing I want to know from you, if you had to give advice to all of the coaches out there, what would be the best advice that you would want to give?
I think that, I said it, be yourself. Be who you are. Be true to yourself. Be who you are. I think that's where people get sidetracked in coaching, is they try to be somebody that they're not. If you're an introvert, be an introvert. There's plenty of good introverted coaches. If you're an extrovert and you have good energy, be that person too. But don't try to be somebody or something that you're not. Take bits and pieces along the way from people, but you can't do it at the expense of who you are as a human being. And so just be true to who you are and be organized. Yeah. And I think if you can do those two things, be true to yourself, be who you are, your personality, let your personality show, your own true, authentic personality show, and then just make sure you're organized.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you. Like, I'll give you just a little snapshot. During my practices, my language is horrible. I am loud and it's bad. But, there are times where I tried to clean that up and say, you know what, you can't be like that. Well, you want to know something? That's not me. And it's hard. And then the true coach in me doesn't come out. So I've actually talked to parents about it, because they've watched my practices and they've heard me. And they all tell me, they go, Jim, keep doing what you're doing. But the kids have heard those words before, believe me.
Yes. Yeah.
So I agree with you 100%. Be who you are, and it'll work.
It works. It does. For sure.
Well, Ryan, again, thank you for taking the time
Anytime,
on a Sunday. Jimmy. This was fantastic. I enjoyed this immensely, and I guess I'll see you in November again.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to reach out to me, it's just rbrownlee@abca.org. So just interact email, or you can interact on the app. Don't DM me, though, because I don't have notifications. I think this is a tip, too. I took all notifications off my phone in 2016.
See, now
this is one of the talks that I give on the peak performance side to coaches. I just spoke for the Twins a couple weeks ago in Minneapolis, and so that's one of the talks that I give. And the phone is great, and I use it probably as much as anybody, but not because it's dinging or buzzing at me. So email me. But don't feel bad if you DM me and I don't get right back, because I don't always check DMs. I just don't, because I don't have notifications set up.
Yeah, see, now that's the professional podcaster in you, because I was going to forget to ask you to give your contact information, and you bailed me out.
It's Coach B. It's Coach B _ABCA. So that's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm a big proponent of TikTok. Thank God it didn't get banned. I don't know who's responsible for that. I'm not getting into politics, right. But I'm glad that TikTok has not been banned yet. Doesn't mean it may not get banned, but I do really like TikTok. I think it's easy to use. I think you can get short snippets sent out that maybe you can't do long form stuff with. I think it's just a good add-on to what Twitter and Instagram bring. I think TikTok's a really good add-on. Yeah,
I haven't. Just to give you an idea, I just got onto Instagram maybe a year ago. So TikTok is going to be a while, but I do.
I like the TikTok algorithm. I know people get scared of AI and that. I like the TikTok algorithm because it feeds you what you pay attention to.
Right.
Instagram and Twitter is basically off how many followers you have and who you follow, and TikTok is towards your interest, what you're interested in. So I get a lot of baseball in there. I get a lot of rock and roll stuff and music stuff. So those are my interests, baseball and music. Those are my big, and reading.
Yeah.
So that's what comes across a lot of my FYP for TikTok is what I'm actually paying attention to, which I think is what it should be for an algorithm.
Yeah. Well, now you talked me into it. I'm going to work a little harder to get it done.
It's easy to use. It is. Yeah. It is. You can upload stuff quickly. It'll caption stuff for you too, which I think is good for the neurodivergent group out there. I think captioning is important for those people that need that. So.
Oh, absolutely. So, all right, Ryan, again, thank you so much.
Best.
It means a lot to me, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Got it, sir. Appreciate you.
Now, is there anyone that doesn't understand how Ryan has made it to become the Assistant Executive Director of the ABCA? I mean, he is involved in so many things that make the ABCA a great organization that all coaches should be involved in. You know, obviously he does the podcast. I'm sure most of you out there have listened to his podcast, which is a really good one. You know, setting up the convention is a monumental task that Ryan is deeply involved in. I mean, you know, there's just so much in his background that contributed to his baseball knowledge. You know, high school player, college coach. He was a college recruiter. Then, you know, getting involved in the ABCA. Now he's doing these youth videos, which are fantastic. Any coach that's out there, just go to YouTube. Look up these videos. They're right there. And I'm sure that Ryan is going to build on that library of videos. The ABCA, they have videos, like Ryan said, thousands from high-level coaches that can help you become a better coach. You know, we all know that it's about educating coaches so that we can be the best that we could be. And Ryan Brownlee spearheads coaches' education through the ABCA. So go out and join the ABCA, please. So, if you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Visit the website at thectbshow.net. Listen to your favorite episodes and please leave us a review. You can also reach out to the show on social media, X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please drop us an email at clearingthebases@gmail.com. Your feedback helps us bring you the best content and reach more people in the baseball community just like you. And also, let me know if you'd like to be a guest. Until then, coaches and players, keep practicing, stay positive, and remember, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you on the next one.